Well, welcome back. We're discussing the fourth industrial revolution. It's all about automation that could affect life as we know it. So what happens to the traditional workforce? Where do we go? Still with us, Amy Zellman is owner of Strategic Narrative Institute and adjunct professor at Georgetown University. From Palo Alto in California, we have Joanne Wei. She's co-founder of Makerspace Beijing, a technology lab based in China. And joining us now from San Francisco is Michael Chewy. He's a partner at McKinsey Global Institute focusing on business and economics research. Michael, welcome to the show. And let me start with you. When we talk about automation, there is a tendency to think that this is something that's going to be happening at some time in the distant future. But it's happening already, isn't it? I mean, how pervasive is automation in our lives right now?
Well, it indeed is something that's happening already, and it has been happening for at least 150 years. So it's not a new phenomenon to a certain extent. I think what's remarkable and causes it to be very interesting now is that there are a set of technology developments which in some ways feel surprising. The ability for some of these machines to do things that we thought they wouldn't be able to do for many years. It's been 2 decades since a computer beat the world champion in chess. Now we have the computers being world champion in Go, which is a much more complex game, but doing other things as well, whether it's self-driving cars or whether it's, which again, people in the artificial intelligence field would have thought would have been quite difficult and now is starting to become a reality. Or even doing things like being able to read lips better than deaf people can. These are tasks which have a set of subtleties, which again, in some ways are surprising. But some of the things that we try to do is research going forward, what is the extent and pace of automation and what could that potentially mean for employment and productivity?
Right, Michael, are you able to put your finger on which sectors of the economy or which parts of our lives are being automated the quickest? Is it just in manufacturing or do we see it across the board in all aspects of our life?
Well, there's going to be a lot of differential impact over time. First of all, what we thought about was it's important not to just look at occupations, but actually individual activities within occupations, because we all do different things in our jobs, and each of those individual activities, in many cases, has a different propensity for automation. And so it's actually important not to look just at entire jobs, but the activities within it. When we do look at those activities, there are 3, and we looked at over 2,000 of them that we pay people to do in the economy. There are 3 categories of activities which have the highest potential, technical potential for automation. Now, one of them is physical activities in predictable environments. And that does happen in many manufacturing situations. It also happens to happen in some agricultural situations as well. But there are 2 other types of activities which have also a very high technical potential for automation. Those are collecting data and processing data. And again, those aren't physical activities, but we do find them, for instance, in the back office of a lot of transactional activities. And so these would be financial institutions, for instance. But quite frankly, almost every industry has a set of these activities that occur in finance, that occur in human resources. And so in many, many different industries, we're going to see the ability to automate processes, particularly transactional processes. And we're seeing that to start to take hold as well.
Amy, you talked a moment ago about the work that you've done with the military. The military is automated. We already know that. We have remote control wars right now, wars being fought by drones. How do you see that unfold in the future?
Well, the question is, will there be fully automated wars? Will there be wars in which the human, as they say, is actually not on, but away from the loop of activity, and the consequences of that are unknown? One possibility is that there are 2 possibilities. And they seem likely. One is, of course, that citizens become ever more distant from their wars because they can be automated and they don't cause powerful effects on us. We are not entailed in them. The second is that the nature of the destructive capacity of warfare becomes economic as opposed to human. The question is, how quickly can you, for example, tire economically an adversary? Those are only a couple of the possibilities.
But ultimately it will affect humans, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, yes.
We can damage economies and reduce buildings and structures to dust, ultimately.
You can also kill people.
Yeah, you can also kill people. Joanne, as you've worked in this field, as automation develops, what happens to the idea of work? I mean, how will our work lives change?
Well, I think, because I live in China, I think the work life in China right now, because some of the very basic job has been already replaced by some of the enterprise software. I think it's quite interesting. But and also because I'm working on the makerspace, we are creating a lot of new technologies like AR, VR, like AI, robotics. So I think in China, something is just got started, but it's like developing super fast. Yeah.
Amy, automation is also a very big political issue. If we look, just had an election here in the United States. Donald Trump was complaining that American jobs have been stolen, outsourced, exported. He's promised to bring them back to this country. But of course, what we didn't hear a lot of politicians say, a lot of those candidates who ran for president say, was that those jobs are not coming back because they've been lost to automation.
That's absolutely right. It is extraordinary that not one of the major candidates in the American election actually mentioned that. And what it tells us is that this is still a conversation that is very difficult to have in this country, and perhaps we have to reach a version of crisis before we have it. Maybe we are beginning to now. As Joanne says, though, automation is also taking place in other countries, and that will change the way that outsourcing unfolds, because there is no longer a need to outsource. If you can produce extremely cheaply by reducing labor costs to either nothing or very little at home. Yep. So the entire kind of geo-economic landscape could change.
Joanne, what kind of impact would that have?
So I think, because I visit some very traditional enterprise in China, like Chery Vehicle, Sony, very big corporation, they have already started using some robots to replace some of the work of their, heavy labors. So it's just get started. But from what I hear, those companies are starting looking for the opportunity, overseas, trying to work with more robots company, and even they're looking for the investment or M&A opportunity with the robotics company overseas. Yeah.
Michael, if we look at something like driverless cars, we're hearing a lot about that right now. How far are we away from when we see, 60, 70% of the cars on the road without a driver?
Well, there are lots of different projections for how long that will take. I think, we're already seeing some pilot machines on the road. But quite frankly, I think it's worth thinking about these types of timeframes, because absolutely, even today, our research says that about 50% of the activities which we currently pay people to do in the economy could potentially be automated by adapting currently demonstrated technologies. And you say, well, gosh, that's 50% of their jobs in total. But in fact, there are other factors which affect how quickly that might happen, how long it takes the technology to actually be developed, which is one of the things that's happening with self-driving cars. But also when you can actually have a positive business case, because you have to net out the cost of the technology, which does decline over time, against the cost of human labor, plus all the other benefits, and then the natural curve of adoption. So in a market such as the United States, which is actually saturated roughly with vehicles already, even the natural replacement cycle, even if these types of vehicles were available at the same price, and they aren't, as our current models of cars, it will take something like a decade for that actually to turn over. So that'll actually take a considerable amount of time. Again, I said that right now about 50% of the activities could potentially be automated by adapting currently demonstrated technologies. But when you take all of those other factors into play, the middle of the many scenarios we modeled, that doesn't happen until 2055, about 40 years from now. But the other thing that I'd point out is both United States and China are similar in the following way, in that basically because both countries are aging, we actually need automation plus everybody working in order to have economic growth, in order to meet the GDP per capita targets that we set, so that the next generation has better lives than we do. So really, we think that the challenge to be addressed is not mass unemployment, but mass redeployment. How do we make sure people continue to work and do different and new things, even as the machines start to automate the activities which they currently are doing?
Joanne, talking about that next generation, is the workforce of the future being trained for this new world?
Well, because I realized, the world going to look very different since like 7 years ago. That's why I got, started Makerspace. So besides running Makerspace, I'm running this education company. It's called Creatica Lab. We're providing the holistic, curriculum for kids about learning how to coding, how to soldering, and we're actually using these very cutting-edge technology tools to helping the kids to understand the world. Especially we input a lot of the ideas about design thinking, about industrial design, because we believe the next generation. So far, I cannot expect it, like what kind of the challenges they're going to have in the future. But I'm sure after they master all this like very cool technology, they can definitely create some of the new opportunity for themselves.
Yeah. Right, Amy, I was talking earlier on about Klaus Schwab, the co-founder of the World Economic Forum, talking about the future. He says privacy is going to be one of the greatest individual challenges posed by new information technologies as we move into the future. And we know right now, under the guise of security, the United States, for instance, collects vast amounts of information, not just on people here in this country, but around the world. What impact is that going to have?
Well, as with most technological transformations, we will go through, and we are going through, a period of making sense of what we will be in the future. We won't necessarily have problems with privacy if we adjust our understanding of what information is ours. If we get more autonomy over our own information, we may actually have to systemically change, but we're not there yet. Right now, we have companies and governments and other entities taking, using, and profiting from information that flows off of us without us knowing or without us necessarily fully consenting. So in the near term, we are disrupted as private beings. There are outcomes potentially for us in law enforcement and our ability to use credit and our ability to buy a car and our ability to get into a school. So what we need to do is start to develop ethics around the use and control of information.
Right, Michael, you are a partner at McKinsey, as we mentioned in our introduction. It's one of the biggest consultancies in the world. As more and more jobs become automated, as we move ahead into this new world, what's the kind of advice that is being sought from a company, like from a consultancy, like McKinsey?
Well, certainly just understanding the technology is one of the things that a business leader has to understand. But then being able to understand where that potentially can be best applied within their organization. And so sometimes being able to just, as I talked about, disaggregate all of the activities within an organization and be able to create a heat map for where there's the greatest economic potential. And then there are questions about how do you actually implement that? When will the technology be appropriately mature? And then how do you do the change management? How do you, be able to change what people's jobs are? Because as I said before, this will affect almost every occupation. Only, less than 5% of occupations can be fully automated. All their activities can be automated. Rather, over 60% of occupations have over 30% of their activities that can be automated. That basically means every employee has the potential to change what they are going to do as they do things that are complements of what the machines do. And so again, those are some of the challenges that a business leader has to take into account as they think about capturing the value of automation while changing their workforce, transforming their workforce, and taking advantage of the power of automation.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for joining us.